Welcome back to another episode of the Gaslit Truth Podcast. We are so glad you're here. Make sure before we get started, you like and follow and share and comment on all of our social media platforms and where you listen to the Gaslit Truth. You can also send us a email at the gaslittruthpodcast@gmail.com. With that, I'm going to issue a trigger warning on this one today, which I try not to do as much as possible. But this story that we're about to talk about is very tough to discuss and also very hard to hear and see. So, if you are listening to this episode, you might want to take a trip over to YouTube because we're going to be sharing some videos and photos along the way. So I'd like for you guys to get the full picture there. So you may have seen this on, particularly, I think TikTok is where I see it mostly, but that's just because that's the platform I'm on mostly. But this is the Joey Marino story. And we have Carley here, which is a friend of Joey Marino. And for those of you who don't know who Joey Marino is, he was an actor and most notably in the show ER, correct? Did I get that
Mhm.
right? Okay.
Yeah, in the
I'm sure
background.
there's way more to Joey than this, but I think those are the biggest headlines.
Yeah.
And yeah, and he has a story about psychiatric medication and what I call polypharmacy, and I think they're calling it polydrugging. You'll hear him say that. Multiple pharmaceutical use, psychiatric particularly, that eventually ended his life. So that's going to be the story that we are discussing today. So I'd like to give a nice warm welcome to his friend Carley.
Thank you for
Welcome.
having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
coming,
Thanks
Carly.
for being here. This is going to be a tough
Yeah.
one.
Mhm.
Because I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before, I went down the Joey Marino rabbit hole on YouTube actually, and I found myself kind of paralyzed watching, like literally, like I had trouble forming words around it. I had trouble watching it.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
was just kind of lost in my thoughts about the whole thing. And
Mhm.
the other thing that I kept thinking about was all the other people that have gone through something like he has that don't get the chance to have a voice in this. So I feel like in telling his story, we're also giving a voice to so many.
Yeah.
So yeah, so let's get started with a little backstory on who you are, Carly, and what's your connection with Joey.
So I started a page for ER 6 years ago, and Joey was one of a few people that joined and followed and stuff. And for the first 4 years, we kind of just talked a little bit, and I'll say, "Hey, do you want to do this interview? Do you want to do this and that?" And then the answer would always be no. And so I didn't think nothing of it. Like, okay, maybe he just doesn't care or something. But it turned out
Sure.
he did care, but he just couldn't do it. And so when he went to the Mississippi State Hospital, and that's when I knew he was polydrug. That's when I knew all what was going on. And when he had gotten out in March of 2022, that's when he and I talked on the phone, and I said, "You could have just told me. Like, I would have helped you. I would have done something." He's like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, I know, but I'm telling everyone now."
So the interesting story to me is that he literally slid into your DMs essentially, right? Like he like
Yeah.
slides into your DMs. Right? And you're like, what is going on here?
Like, wait
Um,
a minute.
yeah.
Yeah.
Did he ever talk about why he did that? Did he ever mention like why he picked you, like why he picked this as his route?
You mean for like why he was on medication or why we
No, why he
connected?
reached out to you in the first place. Yeah.
Oh, because so a person that he and I knew and thought we could talk to and stuff, she um had done a GoFundMe, and that's how I knew. So I started promoting the GoFundMe, and I was like, "Hey, I want to help you and do this. Let me do this with you guys." And then that's how I started getting connected more.
Oh, okay. All right. That's interesting because we're like, how in the
Yeah.
world does this happen? And then suddenly, you're just this person who now is kind of the speaker for him, right?
Yeah, I was just a bystander. I'm like, I just want to
Yeah.
help, and all of a sudden, like, you know,
Yeah. So, would you mind sharing a little bit of his story that you know, his a little bit of his backstory and how this all when you found out what was going on, what else did you learn?
well, he was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, and he always kind of had anxiety. He had a lot of different things go on in his life, and I was told that he would feel anxious a lot of the time. And his dad had a massive heart attack at 44 or somewhere in that area. And he always been like a health nut, and he got extremely anxiety over it because he didn't know if he was going to be the next one to get that heart attack or not. And so, he loved basketball. He loved theater. He was with the New Orleans Jazz with Pistol Pete Maravich for a little bit. And when he
It's
died,
funny, I
that
just have
really.
to say, so I read the story that's listed in Mad in America, and
Mhm.
I was reading it out loud to my husband, and I said, "New Orleans Jazz, Pistol," and he goes, "Pistol Pete," like, right immediately, he goes, "Pistol Pete," and I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah,"
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know what's kind of scary, and I realized a few months after Joey had died, and I'll go back to that story, is so Pistol Pete died in January, January 5th, around there, somewhere like that, in 1981 or whenever that was and stuff. And Joey died January 14th,
Yeah.
and he was his true hero. So the fact that he passed the same month as him was
Oh, wow.
really
Yeah.
bizarre for
Yeah.
me. I was like, wait a
Yeah.
minute.
I think
Yeah.
when you start putting things together, it's a little bit mind-blowing, like,
Yeah.
"Oh," all this stuff, like, yes, so
And I'm
mhm.
known for that. I'll put every little thing together and people go, really? I'm like, yes, really.
Yeah.
Yes.
Makes
Yes.
sense to me,
It
why
does.
not? Mhm. Yes, so go
Yeah.
ahead. Mhm.
And so he did that for a few years, and then 1994-ish, 95-ish, he worked on a movie with Anthony Edwards, Delta Heat,
Yeah.
and he did that in New Orleans, and that was his ticket to come to LA. And so he drove to Burbank to Warner Brothers, and he started doing Yar, and he did that from season 4 to season 8. So when Anthony left the show, he was the background orderly, and then he went off to some other shows and stuff like that. And so when Anthony left the show, he was just, what a lot of people have told me, he always had like anxiety. He always liked being in his own little circle, and he didn't want to like go travel for filming. He liked being on the set. And so when all that was done, he got to a doctor that was a family member that had helped him, and he got Prozac for the first medication and had a reaction and felt suicidal, and he never felt suicidal at all until he got on that, and he developed akathisia. And then from there, he developed like other systems and stuff, and got like tons of different medications. He was on 30 to 32 different medications in a 10-year span.
I
Mm.
wanna, just kinda slow down for 1 second because the first medication you mentioned was Prozac, which
Yeah.
is a very commonly prescribed medication,
Hmm.
for many people, and, he had almost an immediate reaction of
Yes.
suicidality to that, which I
Right.
also feel like is common. It it's common, unfortunately, very common that this happens, but we don't talk about it again. And
Hmm.
then when Carly mentioned akathisia,
Yeah.
I just want to discuss what that is a little bit here, and maybe Jen and I can help with that discussion, because akathisia is also a term that we don't discuss or have a name to it. It seems like a very medical term. But go ahead, Jen. Do you have some thoughts on
Yeah, no,
akathisia?
I was just gonna say there is a video that is up here, and Joey discusses and he tries to describe actually what that is. And I've got a couple here that I'm going to show. That one's not up at my fingertips right now, but the idea of he talks about that internal restlessness, right? Which is something I've recently went through as well. So when I was watching some of these videos, the like it's very hard as somebody I'm going through this right now too. I was having a really hard time, Carley, watching some of the videos that were out there. And I think part of the reason why was because I've sat in these spaces that he has. And I can actually understand what that internal state of restlessness feels like, and that you have to just move and you can't sit still. And it's so terrible that you feel this overshadowing sense of doom. And it's as though this is not going to go away. And for someone who's never been suicidal, similar to him, myself, right? When you're in that state, you start to contemplate how to make it disappear. And what are the things that you can do to make that internal sense of doom and restlessness disappear? And I had a very strong reaction to watching the videos, because I can sit in this with him. So essentially, it's hard to describe. Akathisia is a very subjective thing, and when you start to look it up and read about it in books, right, like people's description of it is different across people. But the one thing that I think is very common amongst it is just an internal state of restlessness, and you feel like you are out of control. You do feel like you do not have control over anything, and then it leads to some paranoia, and it leads to these thoughts that people would say, "Well, you must be psychotic then." When in
Which then
reality,
leads to polypharmacy,
correct.
right? Right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
suddenly you're suicidal and you're telling people, this is how I
Yes.
feel. I feel this anxiousness, this
This is
restlessness. I can't
doom.
sleep. I can't.
It's hard to
So
describe.
clearly you're
Yeah.
either on the wrong dose, the wrong med, or you need more, right? And that set the stage for 30 some meds in 10 years is what you said?
Yeah, and like on the website, I named every single medication he was on and each dosage that they did, and he would tell me I was on the lowest dose of Seroquel, and I got a hold of his medical stuff. I said, Joey, no, you weren't. Like, what do you mean? Like, you were on 100 milligrams, 50 milligrams, then 25. He was like, what? I'm like, yeah. So you didn't know what's going on then? Like, what? I was like dumbfounded how he didn't
So
know that.
disconnected even from what he really was given, or it wasn't given, wasn't disclosed to him either, is possibly kind of a question too.
Yeah.
Do you think that he at that point trusted his care providers, or do you think that at that point he was starting to question some things?
He was feeling he could trust his brother. He went with his brother for the first 5 years or something like that. And, they had their times, up and down, what siblings do and stuff.
Sure.
And then the person that he had known from the ER days came in, and that was like a whole different feeling for him. And, he trusted me more and just kind of felt more secure with me. And so when I took over last year, I actually noticed a huge difference in him, really. He, still had akathisia and the dyskinesia and everything, but he had like more calmer days a little bit and then more able to sit up and stuff. So it was kind of like with the weird difference how all that kind of portrayed. And in the 2015-ish area, he had a friend that was supposed to be an advocate too, and he felt betrayed in some ways by him. And, so he kind of felt like couldn't fully trust people up till when I took over.
Yeah, and throughout this story too, Carley, something that it strikes me as is obvious on the back end, but clearly was not happening on the front end, is when you're struggling with dystonia and akathisia and tardive dyskinesia and all of the list of symptomologies that he had, right? Like, I think about the idea of how to understand what's happening to you, but to be able to also make choices
Right.
given what is happening in the storm in your brain. And there's a couple videos of him talking about the storms that he gets, right? And like we
Mhm.
can see in these videos, which we're going to show some of them, right? Like the physical manifestations and even like the neurological cognitive impairments that are occurring, right? But
Yeah.
how is it that it really blows my mind, because you at a certain point you have to put trust in other people, because you don't
Mhm.
have the capacity to fully understand and really comprehend all of it, right? So you put
Right.
your trust in other people,
Yeah.
Well, I also want to say this.
you know?
So the stuff that he was going through, the dystonia, the akathisia, the tardive dyskinesia,
Mhm.
this is, I'm not even sure how to put words to this. When you see somebody going through that, I think we have this automatic idea that they are incompetent humans now. Because their body movements aren't their own
Yes.
anymore. So
Mhm. Yes.
we tend to override what they want, or think they have no idea what they want, because now they're literally look feeble,
Yeah.
or infirm.
Yes.
I had mentioned this to Jen because there was a couple videos she's going to show, and you could see the tardive dyskinesia, and that's the involuntary muscle movements, but often it's facial things like
Yeah.
tongue and mouth and neck and all of that. And when I worked in the prison system, there was a guy there that had that. And
Wow.
he was he looked just like Joey. I mean, I could see the whole thing was replaying in my brain.
Mhm.
And I remember I had never seen that before. And if you do see it, it's alarming, like, because it's
Yeah.
so over the top for some people. For other people, it's not. It's more like a small lip or jutting of the tongue, in and out. It's still alarming. Whenever I see it now, I'm like, go to the doctor. This is not okay. Like, you need to
Yeah.
not, no, this
Yeah.
is going to get worse or stick around forever. But I clearly remember people dismissing this guy,
Yes.
dismissing him as a human because of the tardive
Yes.
dyskinesia.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
feel like I'm wondering if that's what Joey went through as well.
Yeah. And I'm
100%.
yeah. It's, and I'm this actually, if it's okay if I play a video here, there's one that is on joeymarinostory.com, which is where the videos and the photos that I had just shown, and I'll bring up where that is coming from. There's a video out there that is entitled "Being Labeled Something That You're Not." And I think that that's very imperative for kind of what we're talking about here. So I'm going to bring it up and see if I can get this to do what I would like for it to do. If you're all right with me bringing this up, Carly.
Yeah, that's
And
fine.
I'm gonna share my screen here so that people can see just a piece of what this looks like. And it's not going to be super slick here, and I'm trying my best to just make it happen. Here we go. All right. All right, so here's our video we're going to watch here. If I can get it to pop up for me.
I can't hear it, Jen.
Do you have audio on it?
Mm-mm.
It's not bringing the audio through here.
I mean, I can hear it, I think,
Unfortunately.
through if you can
Yeah,
put
it's
your
coming through
microphone. Yeah.
it's coming through my computer. It's not going to shoot. All right, I will pause that right now. I'll see if I can bring it back up and get the audio, because I would like the audio to be coming through here, and it's not. But it's Joey describing people saying that he is crazy and labeling him things that he is not.
Mm-hmm.
But
And you can see in the video, if you're watching it now, the facial movements that he's also experiencing, and he's trying, as he's talking, trying to cover it up. You can tell, like, he's just trying to talk through it or move through it. It kind of reminds me of Michael J. Fox with this Parkinson's. It reminds me a lot of those movements.
He
Yeah.
was
I'm
obsessed
gonna.
with Michael J. Fox.
Oh,
He
was
was
he?
what?
Yeah, he was. Like,
He's obsessed
maybe I
with
am
Michael J.
him.
Fox. Yeah. Yeah. I'll play in the background here and see if I can get this to come up here. So I'll pause it and I'll let you guys keep going with your
Okay,
conversation there,
as you
because
do that,
it would be
I
great if
did
I
find,
could get this to pop here.
yeah,
Oh,
so I did find he had written into Mad in America in 2021. And I
Mhm.
didn't know that, because I saw your article that was recently published in Mad in America, and everybody should go read it because it's very
yes.
compelling.
Mhm.
But I think he wrote like a little some type of poetry or something is all I can do. So
Yeah.
I'm going to read that out loud because I think it does a pretty good job. It's called Bedridden by Joey Marino. Um, I can remember certain feelings, but I can't feel very well. I can't hold someone's hand because my hands overgrip. They squeeze very hard. They open and close rapidly and flail around until they stop. My skin cannot be touched, even through my clothes, because it is excruciatingly painful and oversensitive. All my muscles and bones pull in every direction in constant contraction. As soon as I initiate a movement, a whole cascade of jerks and flailing moments ensue until it stops and stiffens again. For the first time in my life, people are scared of me. And that last statement that he had was like gets me a little choked up because I'm like,
Yeah.
people were afraid of him because of the movements and how he presented because of psychiatric medication harm. And that
And
is
that was
super.
right before he went to the Mississippi hospital. He did that like days
Yes.
before he left.
Okay. So yeah, this was published December of 2021. So,
Hmm.
and that was before you came around too, right? Like you knew him then, but you weren't
Hmm.
with him then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more because my biggest curiosity with him is in these later videos and things like, um, was he okay? So this is the part that I'm trying to connect. Was he off all of the psychiatric medications at the times of most of these videos, or what time was he ever off of them, or did he ever successfully taper?
Well, I know that he tapered in 2020, and I actually have a notebook he wrote. Like he was on Valium and like kind of did a little bit of history of what was going on each day and stuff. And so he was tapering, and then went to the hospital, and he was cold turkey off of it. They pulled him off of everything.
Oh.
And so when he moved to Los Angeles, he was off of everything for like a month, and then he had to get Ativan and Valium again.
Hmm. So because of the harm, he was never fully completely off anything then too, right? Because they couldn't successfully taper him.
Now,
Yeah.
in like in October of last year too, he started to taper, and he was on Klonopin, trihexamidol, and carbazepine for March through um, December of this last year. And so when he was tapering, he wanted to do it by himself. He didn't want no doctor's help.
He
He
didn't
was
trust
scared
anyone
to do it.
anymore. Hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
he was just like full on worried about it, and I was worried about it because I'm 400 miles away. I can't just go down the street and get him. Something was going on, and so he started doing that and started going a little too fast and got too ambitious with it and started having more problems.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what I was curious about, if he ever actually successfully got off,
Hmm.
and, that's the scarier part because he was then turned into a forever consumer because he
Yeah.
couldn't ever successfully get off, or I guess his symptomology would get worse, right?
Yeah, and he wanted to get off of it. He wanted his old
Of
life
course.
back. He wanted to go back on the set and work out in the gym and do all this stuff without being in so much pain. But he just
Ye
couldn't get to that point.
Yeah, and so he was how was he perceived by other people? Was he perceived as someone who was suffering or something else?
It was kind of both. You had some people that believed him and helped him and this and that, and you have other people that faked it. And then later on, when they get their way of certain stuff, they say, "Oh, he was just faking it." But
Mhm,
it's like you can't fake this stuff. There's no way. You know.
mhm.
Yeah.
When you saw him, when you were able to lay your eyes on him, because your relationship that you had with him was, over the phone and things for quite a while, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
When you were actually to physically see him, what was your first initial thoughts about that?
Well, 'cause I was going to Burbank. That's where he was living at the time, and he would actually lay in bed. He couldn't really get up. He was having like a really hard day. But as soon as he saw me, he got up and it's like, "I want to give you a hug," and we hugged. And I just like, you know, it was sad, but I was happy to see him and
Mhm.
happy he was okay at the time. And
Yeah.
just really difficult, but really good at the same time.
Mhm. How did you get to the point where he was the one like, "You're the one that I want my story to be shared with"? Like, how did you get to be in that position with him?
So, for the 2 years, he and I got real close, and then, we talked every single day. We talked, multiple times a day, texting this and that. And
Mhm.
when it became just me, him, and a different friend of ours, we really went at it and talked and stuff. And I was the one that paid his phone bill for him. I was the one that helped pay the rent for him and all this stuff. And so he knew I had good intention. My heart was pure. And it was
Mhm.
pure since day one of me helping him. I've never changed. The money part never came to my mind. I said, if you want me to have it, I will. Otherwise, I'm okay. You know?
Mhm. Yeah, so because I feel like that's such an interesting part of the story is that when
Hmm.
someone finds somebody to share their story and says like it's like handing over themselves to
Yeah.
you. Yeah, and so what do you think the actual story is that he wants people to know? You know, I mean his story is terrible. I mean the whole thing is a travesty of the psychiatric care in the United States. But
Yeah.
what do you think he really wanted people to know? Like, what is the actual story that he wanted you to tell?
Just to kind of be more aware, just be more up to date, be your own advocate, and just look up the side effects. Because he was told, don't look up the side effects because you're going to be liable to get them. And so he listened to a certain person that had said that. And
Mhm,
so, he Googled it. He joined Facebook group pages. He joined benzobuddies.org, .org or .com, one of those
mhm,
two. And he, was his own advocate of that way. And he didn't want to be on any of this. He wanted to be out of all of it.
mhm. You know, it's funny because I popped on a not Facebook, a TikTok live with you a couple days ago,
Yeah.
and, I was in my jammies. I was so thankful that the video didn't come on. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." My husband actually came in later and he goes, "You didn't go on a live looking like that, did you?" And I said, "No." Thankfully, it was just my profile picture. But
Well,
anyway,
that's what I like to do, so you're good.
for sure. Oh, hold on, my mic is having problems again. Um, okay. So, you had said on there that somebody had told him, "Don't look up the side effects because then
Hmm.
you're likely to have to experience them."
Hmm.
And I think to me, if somebody were to say, "Don't look up the side effects because you're likely to have them," I'd be like, "Then I'm not taking this." Because, to me,
Yeah.
that's the warning shot of warning shots, right? Like,
Yeah.
"Don't do this." And I find it very fascinating that someone would say that and say because, basically, if you see a side effect, that means you're gonna manifest that side effect, and I'm like, or you just have informed consent, which
Hmm.
means if you suddenly start feeling a certain way, it is likely a side effect rather than
Yeah.
a psychological manifestation,
Yeah.
of there's Jen, she's back. She left us for a hot second.
Technical difficulties here.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
that's okay. That's all right. So we were talking about, he was told from I think a family member or something to this was the Prozac, I believe, right? We were talking about
Hmm.
the Prozac. Um, don't look up the side effects because if you look up and see the side effects, then you're likely to experience the side effects.
Hmm.
And I'm like, yeah. And so what do you think about that, Jen? If someone were to tell you, don't look it up.
So I saw that and some of the information that was out there, and I can tell you, I had somebody very close to me recently who had a parent who was told that same thing. This was just within the last few weeks, right? From a psychiatric prescriber.
Hmm.
Don't look up the side effects of that anti-anxiety medication
Hmm.
because it's just going to give you more anxiety. We're putting it
Yeah.
where this is why we're giving it to you, right? Don't look up that, and it makes me really fucking sick, actually. Like
Yeah.
for somebody in a position to, because here's the deal, that's because those side effects. So you actually, it's like there's a difference. and I don't want to get down a rabbit hole here, but for a prescriber or a provider who doesn't understand a harm that can come, whether it's lack of education, understanding, right? Like to say that to somebody resonates with me differently than a prescriber who actually knows these are the side effects. This is what will happen to you and tells you to ignore it. Like those to me are two very different scenarios. So here you had somebody who actually was saying to Joey, or somebody close to Joey, don't look it up because that'll happen to you, because they have an understanding of the idea that it does happen.
Yeah, and I understood why he didn't look it up. I understood that he was desperate. He wanted to feel better. He
Yes.
wanted to be okay. So I don't like
100%.
judge him on that. But
Yes.
just the fact that this person would say that, and like,
Well, I want to
really?
say
It's hard.
this isn't judgment on a consumer, on Joy, right?
No.
Because when we
Right,
are
no.
consumers and we go to the doctor, we are in a place that is like, please help me. I need help.
Trust.
I need to figure
Yep.
this out.
You put trust into
Um,
somebody
right.
because you're in that space.
But that is even a bigger space to apply informed consent, in my opinion.
Right.
That doesn't mean you are so
Yeah.
desperate that you don't get informed consent because you cannot consent when you're in
Yeah.
that place. I'm like, unless you are court ordered, you can consent to your life and you can consent to your own care. So if
Yeah.
if a provider were to say that, I was just desperate, I would take anything. To me, that's a red flag for somebody who really needs to slow down and get informed consent, right?
Yes.
Because they are
Yeah.
literally willing to do anything to help make this stop. That doesn't mean, and I know this wasn't a provider that said that, but that doesn't mean that your provider still can't give you informed consent. But I also then partner that with, okay, so a family member said, don't look this up. The provider should have told him anyway, like as part of their informed consent process. It's not on the
Yeah.
consumer to look things up. It's on the provider to give
Share that
legal
information.
informed consent.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like, so
Yes.
he should have gotten that and he didn't. And that to me is one of the first failures. Now he could have gotten informed consent in the doctor's office and they said, hey, just so you know, you could feel suicidal and have akathisia immediately. And then he would have had to make that decision. And he still could have said, okay, I don't care. I want it. You can still do that, but it doesn't sound
Right.
like, from what we know, and this is speculation, that he even had the opportunity to have that conversation, or if a doctor would have said you could get akathisia, I would have been like, what is that? I have no idea what that
Yeah.
is, but I've never heard a doctor tell anybody you can get akathisia from anything. The word doesn't come out of anyone's mouth. It's weird.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, and even as a consumer, right, for 20 some years on a psychiatric medication, up until about
Never.
a year and a half ago, I'd never heard of that word. I didn't even know what it was until I started to titrate and learned what that was, right?
The
So
hard way. She learned the hard way
I mean, the same
from
way
herself.
that right, like that even Joey and other people who are out there that have been harmed by psychiatric medications, you don't know it. Oh, you don't always know what it is. And then when you experience it, you start to get curious and you go, this just can't be. It can't just be that I take a medication or I come down off of a medication and this happens. Nobody told me about this. Like, what is it? There's a video that Joey has up that was put up for him. It's labeled tardive dyskinesia, dystonia, and akathisia. And in this video, Joe is laying in what appears to be like his bed, and he is describing to the world what was happening to him at the time during this. And I've got it up here, and I'm gonna play it, and I'm gonna see what we can get out of it.
Joey, why are you like this? Seroquel is said to be the main culprit by my neurologist, which I have tardive dyskinesia, dystonia, tardive akathisia, all because of Seroquel, given to me off-label sleep. Seroquel is FDA approved only for schizophrenic and bipolar people. It is not FDA approved for you and I. This is given off-label to us for sleep and anxiety. And the scariest part is Seroquel is given to children. Children are being given Seroquel. Children for anxiety and sleep. They are given
All right.
to it.
So I'll pull that down off here.
A psychiatrist diagnosing that they need Seroquel.
Oops, I can still hear it, Jen.
All right.
Feeding them. The children in our country are being destroyed by the Seroquel. The grown-ups, look at this. This is a grown-up.
There you go. That when you see that now, Carley, what do you think?
It's difficult.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And was that the Joey that you knew?
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. So we have a question, like, who was doing all that recording?
It was a person that he knew from the ER days. She
Oh, okay.
picked him up and brought him to Los Angeles to get some treatment and stuff. And that's who was doing all the talking behind
Okay.
the
Yeah.
camera.
The Seroquel, like when she said, and this is being prescribed to our children for sleep, that hit hard for me because I know a
Yeah.
lot of kids who are prescribed Seroquel for sleep. And I said to Jen, I reached out to her and I said, I wonder if these kids that are prescribed these hardcore psych meds or even ADHD meds who still have lots of behaviors or ticking or whatever are really just experiencing akathisia or even a part of tardive dyskinesia as a child, because it is
Yeah.
hard for an adult to explain what's happening to them, so a child can't explain that for sure. So a child will act that out behaviorally, instead. So these videos, however triggering they are to people, I think are probably one of the most important things that people can see.
Yeah.
Because his symptomology was so visual,
Yeah.
so visual. And I also know there's going to be groups of people out there going, well, that didn't happen to me. That didn't happen to me. And I'm thinking, that didn't happen to you at that level. That didn't
Right.
happen to you
Right.
at that level.
Right.
It happens to people. It's like a spectrum,
Yeah.
and be glad that it didn't. And I think there was one video that he mentioned that it was between, did you say 30 and 40% of people end up with on Seroquel? Was it akathisia or tardive dyskinesia? I can't remember which one, or a combination of the two things. Yeah, and I looked it up. I looked up the research, and it was accurate. It was 25 to 40% of people. 1 in 4, I believe, is what it said. 1 in 4, something like that. I'm like, 1 in 4?
Yeah.
1 in
It's
4.
insane.
If you were to go to the doctor and be prescribed a medication, they said 1 in 4 people will experience something like this, and show the video of Joy, would you take that?
Yeah.
And I actually had some people say they did show it to the doctor and say, oh, that's fake, or he's just acting, or, like,
Or
well,
he's a
his kids
one-off, he's an
here.
outlier,
Yeah.
he's
He's
that's not a
he's the
normal response.
exception. He's the
Yeah,
exception.
he's the
This
exception to the
it doesn't
rule.
happen to people this way. Yes. Yes.
Yes. And I'm like, again, if you show this to people and that's what your doctor says, I would be the consumer that would walk out the door. Like,
Right.
there's no way. Like, if a doctor dismisses something like that as being incomprehensible, when the actual research said up to 40% of people will experience something on this line, and they're just dismissing it and still wanting you to try it without taking a step back and being like, really? Or I think there was another video that Joey said too, like, about the Seroquel. If you were to tell your prescriber or doctor or whatever that about this, and they're still trying to sell it to you, like to take it or to take more, drop it in their drink and see if they'll drink it. The doctor. And I was like, and he said, he goes, you'll see the doctor go, oh, no, thank you. And I was like, oh, that is powerful. So if I were to drop this in your drink, doctor, would you drink it? The answer would likely be no.
Yeah.
But they'll probably say, because I don't need it. You know what I mean? And I'm like, but there's
That's
so
actually
many.
something the doctor did tell him too. Like, one of the neurologists in Los Angeles was like so loud and yelling, I don't need it. I didn't need it. And like, freaking out over the circle and stuff. And it's like, so why in hell are you prescribing this then? Like, you don't need it. Why do you think he needed it? You know?
Right. Right. I don't know. I mean, this
Mm.
story, if you have not watched it, the YouTube and TikTok are very visual representatives of the Joey Marino story. And I think it's like it's so important because again, that spectrum, this stuff could happen to you and you need to be curious about it. Um, and like I said, I watch this stuff and I'm at a loss for words too. And I wish he could be here today to tell his story
Yeah, me too.
differently. Yeah, I'm glad he entrusted it with somebody that's trustworthy to tell the story. Yeah. And I hope is there anything else in his story do you think that he wants you to tell? Is there anything else?
No, not really. I mean, like I know a lot of people are questioning and wondering what the last year was like for us. And, he and I did try to get DBS surgery, and the friend that was helping us, we did all we could. And Cedar Sinai said it would be 8 months, and he said if I was offered DBS, I would still hang on. And
Oh,
so,
is DBS deep brain stimulation? Is
mhm,
that yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so, we kind of give up on that part because it was just too much for him. It was like, there's no more hope. There was people giving him false hope and saying you're gonna get better, and he never was. And November of last year is when he had OD'd, and he just couldn't take it no more. And I understood why, and I knew that was his way of saying I'm done with this.
Yeah.
And I wasn't mad at him about it. I just kind of wish he had been a little bit more vocal about it to where the point because the ambulance was called and his heart had stopped for like 20 seconds or I don't know how long. And he was rushed to the hospital in ICU and they were like trying to intubate him and stuff. And I kept telling them he had that DNR, and they would not listen to me. They said we need the papers, and he had the papers, but the paramedics didn't
Mm.
want to take it. And so when I was able to get to a fax machine and I faxed it to them, and they finally decided to listen to me. And he woke up and he was all over the place, pissed off and stuff, and I understood why.
Mhm.
And, me and the friend that was helping us, we were trying to tell him, like, look, we weren't the one trying to do anything. Was the owner at the house that he was staying at who was doing this. And so when he got out and tried it again, in this particular next hospital, he and I had a lot of interactions with, and they tried to gaslight me. I mean, they tried to say, "Oh, he doesn't want no one to know where he's at, what's going on," and I called bullshit on them. I said, damn well he's not talking about me. Where the hell is he going? And 30 minutes later, they told me, and they took him to a hospital in Torrance, California. And from there, the doctor was even more worse and horrible. Um, they said to me, "Well, we want to detox him." And I said, Detox with what?" And they said,
Oh my
"With
gosh.
Klonopin." I said,
Oh
"How in
god.
the hell are you running a damn place like this and telling me Klonopin is a detox pill?" Like I was so livid with them when they said that to me and to Joey. And, as time went on, they wanted to do all this stuff. And I had actually flown into town because I was scared to death about not seeing him again. And
Mhm.
so when I got to town and stuff, and I saw him with another friend of ours, and they almost wouldn't let us see him. They said, "We had to be here at this time to be here at this time," and it wasn't stipulated in the website. And so when we finally did see each other, we both just started crying. Me and him looked at each other like, "How in the hell is this happening right now?" And
Mhm.
so when the next day came, I got a call from the doctor, and he was like, "I know Joey had this condition, but I really feel he's milking this." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Well, I'm watching him from the nurse's station. He's sitting all calm and stuff. 20 seconds later, he's moving around like, oh, he saw me. He started moving. I said, call it movement disorder. You should look it up.
Yeah.
So, and I
Right.
told him, you know, and he's like, well, I want to help Joey, but can you tell him to be nice to me? I'm like, why not have a conversation with him? Talk to him like a human, and
This
then
is that
see.
thing. This is what I'm
Yeah,
saying. The way that he
yeah,
presented people perceive that as him being feeble, right? He cannot
yeah,
have conversation. He's not a human anymore.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
It was
exactly it.
sad. I was just like, now it's over an hour away from where he was. If I was not going to leave that day, I would have went down there and talked to him in person. Be like, you were pathetic, you know?
Mhm.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, but that's what it is, and I think that's what we need to be cautious of is that
Yeah.
people with significant mental health concerns are
Mhm.
human beings, and these concerns were imputed by
Mhm.
big pharma. They weren't because he
Yeah.
had anxiety. They
Mhm.
and it
Yeah.
just makes me wonder how many people are in that same situation, where psych meds actually, create more harm. And we did an episode on iatrogenic care, which is,
Yeah.
when the thing that's supposed to help you hurts you, and how many
Mhm.
people have been disabled in on the spectrum, right, of disability because
Yeah.
of psychiatric medication, and just the
Yeah.
dehumanizing of care. Oh, I'm gonna air quote care, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
the dehumanizing of care.
And so, like, going back to March of last year, when me and the friend that was taking over POA with me, and another friend from the show, we all went to go see Joey and stuff. We were like all together and everything, and I could see the deep sadness in both the friends' faces when I was sitting with Joey, all of us talking, and it devastated me. And it's like, this is the guy who was an actor, a personal trainer, and loved life, and did all what he wanted, to bedridden in severe pain 24/7, and that really devastated me to see that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we're just a little podcast trying to help get this big story out.
Mhm.
Um, I think you've had some denials of bigger places, bigger media outlets. Is that
Mhm.
correct? That they won't
Yes.
take the story? Do they ever give you a reason? I'm just curious. No?
Like I never heard back. Like 2 years ago, we had a page called Joey's Jagged Journey, and no, we had the videos out then. Then after some stuff he and I had found out, he wanted me to take them down. So I stripped every video there was and everything offline, and and I reached out to like 30 different people all over the U.S. and not one person would say anything.
Hmm.
Mm.
Well, I mean, because it goes against conventional narrative,
It,
right? It might
Yeah,
it does.
scare people into not getting psychiatric medication, or help for their
right.
mental health, right? Like, it might scare people. That's the whole thing about informed consent is people think it scares
Yeah.
people, you know?
Yeah,
Mhm.
when Terry and I were talking about this episode before we, got you on here
Mhm.
today, Carly, I was very almost a level of anger that I haven't felt in a very long time, even
Yeah.
for the like I would love to take what your story is, and we are such a grassroots like small podcast, and I'm hoping this pushes something into a
Yeah.
trajectory for this story, that a lot of people aren't willing to hear, people aren't willing
Mhm.
to accept. Okay. um because I wish I could just take it and blow it up because I have so much anger, like even
Yeah.
for anybody involved in the care of him that thought that continuing to polypharmacy this man repeatedly, okay, um, anybody that was ever involved in that, I wish I could just take and remove. Like I just get so angry, right? Like I said to Terry, I'm like every
Yeah.
person that was involved in his care, their licenses should be removed from every single ER doctor to every single provider that knew him to people that were close to him that should have taken care of
Mhm.
him that didn't, because there isn't a ton of mystery to this story. There
Mm-mm.
isn't.
Yeah.
When you lay it all out, there isn't a ton of mystery, but what it is shit people are afraid of and they don't want to talk about it. This is
Exactly.
the stuff people don't want to talk about. This is the shit hidden behind paywalls.
Mhm.
This is the stuff that takes people's lives. And Joey's legacy is us trying to take this and show it to the world.
Mhm.
Somehow.
This we're gonna wrap this up. But I feel like this story is the gaslit truth.
It is.
Yeah, and I still have like a lot of anger. I still have a lot of, unanswered questions that I want to know about certain things that had happened in the last 2 years. And, he and I were super close. And the people from the show that were involved in the last year, I'm always going to be forever grateful for them. This become one of my close friends, every single one of them that were involved. And, when we're just shocked, we would do anything to have him back here. And, and understood why he did what he wanted to do. And, you know, um, we actually had a lot of good talks before he had passed. And one of the things I did tell him, because he had told me about a time that he um, told his dad to let go because, he was in pain and stuff. And so he and I had a FaceTime conversation. I said, Joey, you can let go. You can get out of this pain. You don't need to be in this pain no more. He looked at me and like, that's why I told my dad. I said, I know. That's why I'm telling you this right now because, we all love you. We all understand, but you don't need to be in this pain no more.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, you as a witness endured some medical trauma yourself, just so you know.
Yeah.
So make sure you take care of you too.
Thank
In
you.
in
I know.
retelling, yeah, in retelling the story, I'm sure it just brings up a lot of emotions
Yeah,
for you as well. So make sure you take care of yourself, Carly.
I am. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on here.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here.
Thank you,
And
Carly.
thank everyone else for tuning in to this difficult episode of the Gaslit Truth podcast. So make sure, I feel weird even saying this, like, comment, share, subscribe, all the things,
Yeah.
but basically just love each other and
Yeah.
support
Yeah.
people who are going through such tragic, difficult times.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Alrighty. Well, thank you. I appreciate all this stuff. It really means a lot.
Mhm.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Carly.